Remember how excited you were about West Virginia basketball after those first couple games of the Darian DeVries era? I'm not seeing the excitement anymore after the Backyard Brawl beatdown in Pittsburgh that Cody and I witnessed. And in all seriousness, that was only game 3 of the tenure. They're obviously not going to fire Darian DeVries, nor should anybody expect it, nor should anybody, want to pause the tenure after only a handful of games. But boy, was that very, very bad. Mike Asti, Cody Nespor here, WVU Sports Now, Mountaineer Report. Find us here, of course, on YouTube. Like, subscribe, download. Also find us everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Google Play, Spotify, etc. And yeah, the Mountaineers, they barely showed up. They're out of it from the jump. They never really had a chance in that game. And the size issue, they tried to kind of dance around the topic. They didn't really agree with my questions involving the size issue, but I think it was part of it. Capel basically said that he thought that was their advantage. And it looked like the strategy and game plan that Jeff Capel put forth was perfect, and the Darian DeVries put forth was just not going to work. But early in the season, they have a lot more coming up. They have a trip to the Bahamas coming up, so they're at least going to enjoy that, and they can kind of take a break from the weather that'll be coming towards us in the region. So, Cody, as we're recording this, you were able to just speak to Darian DeVries and players. This is now the first time since the post-game press conferences of the Backyard Brawl we were able to speak to DeVries and company. What's the vibe of Mountaineer basketball after a really, really bad Backyard Brawl loss?
Yeah, I think the vibe is just like there's work to do. Like they've got deficiencies, and I think they knew they had deficiencies, but they just hadn't been exploited yet. So I think the vibe is really just like I said, like we're not a perfect team. We shouldn't think that we are, and let's go back to work and be as good as we can be.
Yeah, and that's fair. Do you get the sense, though, that Darian DeVries and company, his staff, is looking at maybe changing anything up because they finally did get exposed? You can only do so much. They don't have a
Yeah.
7-footer on the team. But we saw all those years with Huggins that even if he couldn't really do too much, he would tinker and give you a whole new lineup just to send a message to the team, if nothing else. Do you get a sense that Darian DeVries, because we're still early in his tenure and figuring things out with him, is he like that at all? Is he in any way trying to send any messages or tinker anything, even if it's just for the sake of it? Or is he not going to freak out over one game and this is the group, this is the strategy, and he feels like it'll still work, just didn't in that one game against Pitt?
Yeah. Nah, I mean, I don't get that at all. It doesn't. There's no sort of panic or freak out or anything. It does. The thing that DeVries is most frustrated about, and he's pretty openly said it, is that the team didn't respond well. Like Pitt's first 9-0 run,
Yeah.
the team didn't respond well to it, and
Yeah.
so if he was like that, it does feel like there's some underlying frustration of just like, why didn't we play better after that? Why did we just
No
kind
better
of
in the
roll
second
over?
half, not even
Yeah,
just 9-0. Like, even if you go in the locker room to kind of rejuvenate yourself, they
yeah.
go in the second half was just as bad.
So that's where it feels like the frustration is, and I don't, it doesn't feel like he's going to send it like Huggins would bench guys.
Right. Huggins, literally, there was a month where he had a different line of every game.
Yeah,
And
so
he was, some would work and sometimes it wouldn't work, but you don't get that sense from
nah.
from
Plus, it's like
DDV.
you know, it's 3 games, right?
It is.
It's
No.
3
Again,
games.
it is 3 games. And again, this is year 1 of a new coach. This is a new roster. This is the transfer portal era. They had to cobble this together. It's only, the first go round with Tucker DeVries, who is your best player, even though his eligibility is not going to allow him to be there forever, of course. So you're not going to freak out. I did have somebody bring up that while they're continuously referring to themselves as a young team, because you hear that a lot, they aren't really young. These are veteran players of the
Yeah.
sport. They're young together. They haven't been around each other that long, but that's just how college basketball is. So I don't think they can use that as an excuse as much. I mean, Huggins got a team that hadn't been around each other to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
And that wasn't year 1 for Huggins, but that is just the way of college basketball today. You're going to have to do that occasionally, even though you'd rather have guys with 2 or 3 years of eligibility.
Yeah.
But it is year 1 with this system. and
Yeah.
it is year one for Darian DeVries. And
Yeah.
it was a team that likely is an NCAA tournament team or believes they should have probably been in last year in Pitt. That if you look at Ken Palm, they believe they're a good team this year. So maybe you just aren't to that level, but it doesn't mean you blow it all up 3 games in.
Yeah. And it's funny because they're not a young roster,
Right.
but they are kind of a young rotation, which is weird because
Okay.
you think Harris and Hansberry start and they're sophomores, and then Powell and Tenor are the top bench guys and they're freshmen. So it is a young rotation, but it's not a young roster, which is a strange dynamic because it's like all
Yeah.
the guys at the end of the bench are seniors, which
Yeah.
you don't usually get. So it is really strange because it's like half of your rotation hasn't been in a game like that before, and half of your rotation has
Yeah.
played 30 college basketball games. So,
Yeah,
so
and even the veterans, they never experienced a backyard
yeah,
brawl, a major conference rivalry like that. We were on the Zoom prior. We're asking questions about anything Darren DeVries had experienced, any semblance of even Creighton versus Nebraska, but that's not the same. It was even brought up on the call that Creighton fans of college basketball are also Nebraska football fans, so they don't even really hate Nebraska. They just want to win that game. That's not the case with the backyard brawl. A Pitt fan is a football basketball. So is the West Virginia fan. Like they're not going to root for Pitt football if you happen to be
right.
rooting for West Virginia basketball. That doesn't work. So they had not experienced anything close to that before. And maybe it was overwhelming. Maybe it was too much. It does give you concern about Big 12 play because as much as Pitt might be a tournament team, that team's not nearly as good as some of the Big 12 teams that are in the top 25 right now. And going to the Peterson Event Center is not nearly the same as going on the road to some of those places in traditional college towns, unlike Pitt that's in a pro city. So if that's too bright and too much of an atmosphere for you, you're going to need to figure something out before that calendar flips to January, because that atmosphere you're going to see in January and February and March is really going to be a problem. And they got embarrassed in Pittsburgh, so I don't know how much more you can get embarrassed, but that's something that Mountaineer fans want to be a thing of the past. It's one thing if the team isn't really ready to win yet. They need to stop getting embarrassed. And they at least took care of some bye games, so they didn't fully get embarrassed in that regard. And I get that you never want to get embarrassed in the backyard brawl.
Yeah.
But you did win it 6 years in a row. You have lost the last 2 years, but one of those losses was in the midst of an interim off a drama, and then you have this in year one. You have the all-time series lead. It's not the end of the universe. But what I do want to also add, though, would we both agree, and I think we have before, that this team is going to go as far as Tucker DeVries takes them?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, so with that said, he got exposed against Pitt. He was taken out of the game against Pitt. Jeff Capel and their players talked about they knew going in they had to scheme against Tucker DeVries and then Small and mostly Tucker DeVries. And once they neutralized Tucker DeVries and realized he wasn't going to do it that night, they felt comfortable they could pretty much coast in the rest of that second half. Does that give you concern about Tucker DeVries, his individual season, because he's looking to try to get drafted in the NBA, which has been a real thing discussed by the program and the national media, and for this team this year that maybe Tucker, I don't want to call him overrated, but he's never dealt with major conference ball.
Yeah.
Are maybe all of the NBA talks cart before the horse with Tucker DeVries?
Probably not because the talent's there. We've seen it
Right.
just in the first 2 games.
Well, that wasn't against Pitt, though. I mean, that's
right, you're right.
RMU. So,
but to your point, I think the concern rises where if he gets no help, like he didn't get any help on Friday. Him and Small both. I mean,
yeah.
Your Capel explicitly said, "Hey, our game plan was
literally
take those 2 guys out," and they did.
Yeah. He diplomatic. He was trying to be nice. He wasn't. Him and the players were trying to be nice, but they made it very clear that was the plan.
Yeah.
We realized we did it about 5 minutes in, and then we're sitting there basically celebrating because that's it. I mean, that's pretty much what they said.
So I think that's where the concern is if there's no help, and that was my main takeaway in the story. If there's no third option, on like every Big 12 team has 2 good defenders.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And like if that's the blueprint to just wreck the Mountaineers this year, every team's gonna do it, and probably pretty easily.
Okay, well then I'll counter you not having any pause about the NBA talk with just for the purpose of this conversation, if what you're saying is true, and obviously teams are going to scheme and they're going to watch that Pitt film and say, we got to do this. And if you take Tucker DeVries out or nobody around is helping and there's no third option, no one else emerges because Small can't really do it enough on his own. Does that not allow Tucker DeVries to show enough at the major conference level that an NBA scout's going to say, we know there was talent, but you never were able to do anything for an entire year because of the way the defenses work and how they schemed against you, so we have pause?
Yeah. I'm not going to claim to understand the NBA draft because it's every time.
Sure. I mean, I'm not an NBA scout either, but to get. So,
I mean, like, there's.
You get what I'm saying, though? Like,
yeah,
I'm not an NBA scout either, but
like,
based on what you're saying, how can he go off for a 25-point night to really show what he can do?
Yeah.
So because you're just going to take the rest away.
Yeah. So I asked Darian DeVries when we talked to him earlier. I very specifically asked. I said, Coach Capel said he wanted to take those two away. Do you want a third option, or do you want those two guys to be able to play anyway? And he basically said, if teams do that, we have to run sets where Tucker gets his touches.
Lord.
And so I think that's going to be the big test for him. Like, I'm sure at Drake, all the defensive attention was on him, right? I mean,
it was easy to break that, though. It was easier to break that in so most of those games. I know they played some games where they played up, but
yeah. So I just think that's gonna be Tucker's big test this year. Is like, you're the guy at a major conference school.
Yeah.
Can you be the guy? Like, can you?
That's what he's trying to prove. That's what
exactly. Yeah. And that's
what people said he could have done before. He was just at Drake because of his dad. Yeah. Well, were you at Drake because of your dad, or were you better suited to be at Drake? We're gonna find out.
Yeah. So that's gonna be, that's gonna be if he makes the NBA or not. That's gonna be if West Virginia has a acceptable season or not, or wins some games or not.
Yeah, and the WVU fan, I'm sure, cares a lot more about the season for the Mountaineers than they do if he gets to the NBA. But that's also part of it. I mean, it's not a stupid conversation because if they get him to the NBA, that'll help them in recruiting and will help the program, and that'll look great for the program. If he ends up not in the league, or he's just getting that summer league cup of coffee that Eric Stevenson got, and the team doesn't make the NCAA tournament, and they don't make the NIT, and they look bad in the Big 12, and they lose the Backyard Brawl, and they're barely winning 13, 14 games. There's only a little bit of a jump from the year before. Yes, it's only year one. There's no reason to fully freak out, but I think some fans would say, what really is the sales pitch here for future players and future Mountaineers outside of just better NIL than maybe the athletic department money like that. And Darian DeVries is a solid coach, so maybe he'll just get a break off year one. He's taken teams to the tournament before, but it wasn't just the sense they lost the brawl, because I mean, colleagues in Pittsburgh, they even were sitting there. You heard them. Yeah. Chris Carter, I'll throw out there. He's a colleague of mine in Pittsburgh media from the Post-Gazette. He made it very clear, very vocally, when him and I were talking. It was very loud. Everyone could hear. I never would have thought it'd be this bad. I thought Pitt would pull away at the end, but not like this. He never was. I mean, people were not expecting it to be that bad, but it could be that West Virginia's strategy got exposed, as you put it, and maybe them being this way is going to be a problem. Now, it doesn't sound like, from what DeVries said, that he's worried about a third option emerging. I'm going to ask you these two questions. Number one, do you believe, and obviously, we're both, tip our cap and say DeVries knows more about coaching a basketball team than us, but do you believe that right, yeah, right. But, we're doing this. He's not on the show. So do you disagree with Darian DeVries, and do you feel like they do need to try to have somebody emerge to be that third option and not just say we're going to run more sets and figure something out?
Yeah.
And if you disagree, who do you think the third option that you would try, should be, that you would try to kind of force feed to make that third option?
Yeah. I think it's well, first of all, I think we should give credit to Pitt. Like, they shot the heck out of the ball in that game,
and they're not going to do that every game. But
right. So credit to Pitt, they played great. That's why it was a huge blowout. And
they should have been a tournament team last year. I do honestly feel that way. They did not get in factually, but they're very hungry and they want to get in the tournament this year. They probably are a tournament team, and you also got to give them credit in the sense of, look at college football. Florida State got screwed last year. They turn around and go 1-9, and they completely, with a similar roster, basically quit on the year because they're still on social media talking about a year ago. Pitt sitting there saying we should have got in last year. We got screwed last year. How can we fix that from Capel on down? We can be better this year and get in the tournament this year and make it so we don't have a couple upsets and don't have a bad loss here or there to get on the bubble. Right now, they're looking like a team that's not on the bubble. They look like a legit tournament team.
Yeah.
And maybe that's also part of West Virginia is facing a better Pitt team right now than even they would have faced a year ago, even if West Virginia is better. But yeah, Pitt had basically their best day and West Virginia had their worst day, and it came together for a Backyard Brawl blowout.
Yeah. In terms of third option, I think the guy they would want is Amani Hansberry.
Okay.
He's very different than Small and Tucker.
He would give you a different guy. He would be
right.
different. The other options people bring up are like a similar person.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, if you're going to go into a game and the opponent's game plan is let's get up on Tucker and Small on the perimeter and let's not let him get touches, I think the fix there is, well, let's throw it inside to Amani and, if he's going to have some space and he's not going to get doubled, let him try and figure it out. Obviously, Pitt took him away too with fouls.
They did. And that's what teams would probably try to do if you get down to that point and it's still close. They would try to do that because, as we've talked about, they have no other big. So if you do that and you're effectively getting him out of the game, then you are just really small from that point on. But maybe he'll win some calls because he is a big, and maybe the referees would give him that respect.
Yeah. But I do think something I've noticed through 3 games is Tucker is not a ball hog. Right? Like he doesn't force it. He just kind of plays in the offense and and I think maybe like as I was watching Pitt, there were like pretty long stretches where he didn't touch the ball. And I kept thinking like whatever you got to do, like you got to get the ball into his hands, right? Like you gotta.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, but I think from a different angle, not even the coaching staff needing to keep getting him involved. Maybe what would hold Tucker DeVries back from really having a career, and this will be like a national phrase, national media kind of, hot take show phrase that I'm going to steal here, but maybe he needs the killer instinct. Yeah. Maybe Tucker DeVries is a really talented player, but he really needs to have someone sit him down and be like, just so in case you didn't know, you're the best player on this team, like by far. And like, this team is only going to go as far as you're going to take them. And if you're down 20 points and you see everyone else that you passed to has missed shots for 5 minutes, I'd like you to try for 5 minutes to take over this thing.
Yeah.
Because like that, maybe that needs to happen. Maybe he needs a killer instinct to take it over.
Yeah. And it's something like when I covered high school basketball, it's something I would think about a lot of like, sometimes if you're struggling, your best player just needs to have the ball. Like even if they're not the point guard or whatever, sometimes, especially if you're struggling with the other team's defense, just get your best player the ball and let them kind of figure it out. And I don't think there was ever really a point on Friday where Tucker did that.
No, not at all.
And I don't know about you, Mike. I just kept noticing, like, especially in the second half, there were like long stretches where he would maybe touch the ball and pass it immediately or something. And I'm just like, let's just dumb it down. Let's just get him the ball.
I don't know if it almost looked like maybe he was losing his confidence a little bit because early on in the game, he took some, I think, bad shots.
Yeah.
He missed some faraway shots and he never got in a rhythm. Even when he scored, he was never in a rhythm the entire game. And then once the score was out of reach, he was still trying to involve his teammates. But at that point, you're down 20. Like, where this isn't the time to be really worrying about everybody else. He never tried to take it over. He never felt in a rhythm. He was missing shots. There were periods of time where you almost forget he's on the court. And again, what I think is really weird about that, going into the game, and this includes West Virginia media and Pitt media, there was a consensus believing, not team-wise, but individual player-wise, who has a chance at the NBA, that Tucker DeVries was the best guy on that court for both teams.
Yeah.
That was what I heard many of Pitt media say that too. They thought Tucker DeVries was the best player on that court for either team, and the chance for the Mountaineers was Tucker DeVries taking over the game, and he could do that because he's that good. Pitt clearly said, well, that's our plan. We're going to take him out of it. not allow that to happen, and then we're going to win. And they had a better team and were able to do it. But he never even flirted with even a second of anybody thinking he was taking over anything, or that he was going to be a difference maker in that game at all. Just lastly, what do you, outside of any of that, is there anything else you need to see from this team as they go to the Bahamas, as they have another game coming up, as they get into the holiday season? This is a streak now with the Brawl behind them. They need to clip off wins here because they're going to drop games in conference play. They're going to. And Ken Palm, who helped them get in the tournament a couple years ago despite losing, is not helping them this year. You're writing about it. They are really bad Ken Palm-wise. They're going to need to win, even for respectability. And these are the winnable games. So I hate to say this. We're on a must-win streak here where you basically got to win the majority of these. What do you want to see from the team? What do you think they need to do to make that happen? And is that reasonable to say with what's coming up?
No, I think certainly, if you're going to say we want to be a bubble team this year.
Even an NIT team. Yeah.
I think you got to go and you got to play pretty well in the Bahamas, right? Like you can't lose all 3 games by double digits. Like, right?
That would be.
Because I was just looking, it's Gonzaga first, which is going to be tough.
That's going to obviously be a loss, aside from that one.
And then it's Indiana or Louisville. And then the other one's Arizona, really good. Oklahoma, Providence, Davidson.
So, I mean, figuring the Gonzaga loss, I don't think there's room to lose more than one other game, and that depends on who all you play.
Yeah.
I mean, just these are, again, it sounds like Louisville's not what they used to be. These are winnable games. The Gonzaga game, again, that feels like that's not going to be a W. But you can't drop too many of these because you go into Big 12 play, and the entire list you'd be reading me would be all top 25 teams pretty much, including several of them in a row.
Yeah.
So if you think that is too tough a schedule for the Mountaineers to handle, you're really going to have a rough road in 2025. This is the chance right now. And to the credit of the program, regardless of who's the head coach, aside from the Eilert year, well, I guess at the end of Huggins and even, well, not the Eilert year, but they've been able to fare well in these tournaments. And out of conference play is where I was going. So the end of Huggins, even when it wasn't what it was before, the Huggins tenure obviously dissipated at the end. It wasn't as elite as it was, but in these tournaments, they fared well. They got to again.
Yeah. And especially like I think the thing in the Bahamas, that'll be kind of the early indication. Like, is this going to be a team that we should be obsessed with Ken Palm? And we should be checking bracketology, and or is this just a team? It's just, hey, it's year one. Let's have some fun, right? Let's see how the young guys develop. Let's have some fun. Let's try to knock somebody off, but we're not going to worry about Ken Palm, and we're not going to care about the bracket, and maybe we'll play in the NIT if it comes to that. But that's I think that's what this Bahamas trips will show, and I don't think that's a bad place for first year head coach with a roster that has issues, right?
No, I think after you lose a rivalry game that bad,
you
get to go to the Bahamas. It's nice. Yeah. I mean, like, that's a nice consolation prize for the Brawl loss. You get to go to the Bahamas. You get to enjoy yourself there. You do got to make sure that the team obviously is not on a vacation. They got to win some games.
Yeah,
I think that might be a test of the mental fortitude of the team too, because you now are coming off a loss and you got a road trip that easily could go off the rails where you're partying more than playing basketball, and that can't be the case.
And I think it'll be really good to see them play tomorrow against Iona, because they've got Gonzaga. Like, Gonzaga's next, so are we going to have hurt feelings from Pitt, and we're all going to be looking at that Gonzaga game, and we're going to overlook it? Like, Iona's a Ken Palm 300 team, right?
You got to win, and you got to win comfortably. But DeVries got to get some points, and you got to feel good about the game.
But they've got a new coach. They've got a new roster. They do full court press. Like, you don't want them to come in here and play you within 5 points at halftime
or knock you off. Like, then that'll feel like last year. You get knocked off, that'll feel like last year then. And that almost will start. I mean, Jeff Capel said it too. I think they're still a good team. I think they can be a good team. I'm rooting for them. I hope they win because it'll help us. And he was honest with that. It was a very honest experience with the Pitt coaches and players. And that's true. So, West Virginia football didn't help out Pitt football at all because West Virginia football kept on losing some more games, and Pitt football and the committee was like, well, you don't play anybody, and when you do, you lose, and the West Virginia win doesn't count for much anymore. That needs to not be the situation this year because you want West Virginia to kind of turn it around, but also obviously Pitt wants them to win. But that's just how the way of the world. You're indirectly helping the team that beats you by winning. But yeah, you drop that game. That's going to be rough. And that's going to have everyone not even check in probably what the score is while they're while they're eating Thanksgiving dinner. I think now you win Iona comfortably. People are going to be looking at their phone while they're eating a turkey and, wishing they were in the Bahamas. But okay, see what you do there. And I do think you need to try to have some semblance of respectability against Gonzaga. I mean, you blown out to Pitt, so obviously, you could get blown out to Gonzaga. But I think now it's the second of those two games against good teams that DeVries and company, like you're saying, they now know their team didn't respond well. They now are going to have more practices. They know what to do. The team has dealt with this. I think now that if they're down in a 9-0 run to Gonzaga early, even if they still lose, you would hope they would respond better, at least. If DeVries is giving you the same press conference saying they just didn't still respond well, I don't know, what's going on. They're fine in practice. The same thing with football. We're good in practice, but then when the bright lights turn on, I don't know. We just aren't as good. I don't, you don't want to hear that too much.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's fair to say DeVries is still learning these guys. So
it is fair to say that, yes.
So it's maybe if they run into trouble against Gonzaga, maybe you put Jonathan Powell in earlier, right?
Yeah, now he'll know to do something else.
Right, because maybe it's because when they went down against Pitt, they let Sincere Harris take a bunch of threes. He missed them all.
I don't think DeVries called a timeout as well until they were already down double digits. He kind of let that play out to kind of see what his team was doing.
Well, yeah, somebody Eduardo Andre called a weird timeout after he jumped on a ball.
Yeah, but from DeVries. Because DeVries eventually called one towards the end of the first half where it was okay, settle down. We're stuck. We got to, try to compose ourselves. But you could argue that should have been called earlier. Yeah. And I know you want to keep him, but maybe he's now know I got to mentally reset my team early or else we're going to let this game get out of hand. Yeah. So, he's learning the team. He's learning the situation. You won't have to worry about a road crowd as much as in Pittsburgh. Maybe that all helps too. But there's a little bit of pressure now. I mean, it's year one. I mean, there's a little bit of pressure now to at least show respectability. That's kind of the plan of this year. Show respectability. You're still a more talented team than teams you lost to a year earlier when it was tons of drama. And they weren't respectable in the brawl. I think that's the problem. They didn't just lose. They weren't respectable. They got to at least be respectable in these games. And when you have Iona, last year you would have lost. This year you got to win by 20. Just like last year you would have lost RMU. This year you won by double digits and 30 points. You got to do that again. That'll do it for this basketball edition here of Mountaineer Report. Check in with Cody's coverage and all of our coverage at WVU Sports Now of this basketball team. And as they enjoy the Bahamas, we will not be there. We will not be there covering in person the Bahamas. I'm sorry, we're not sending Cody. I'm not going. We're not going to be doing that. That'd be great, though. So they get to go. But check in with our coverage to see if and how they turn things around now off of the brawl loss. Also, find Mountaineer Report here everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. And also here on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell for notification whenever we pop a show to your channel.